Among the few places upon this much-traveled earth which have not yet succumbed to the ever-widening influence of civilization are Papua and Calah. Papua is that part of New Guinea which is a dependency of Australia, embracing an area of about 90,000 square miles, rich in minerals, but a region of mountain barriers, gigantic swamps, and vast impenetrable jungles, populated by a hostile and highly primitive people. At Port Moresby, chief landing place on the coast of Papua and tiny gateway to the largest unexplored area on the earth, we find our first scenes of native life. Although this setting is apparently a peaceful one, we are now on the very rim of a land where the head of a human being is the coveted possession of native warriors. Papua has been governed by the white man for less than half a century, and even today his control extends only along the coast and very few miles inland. Beyond that, the natives live as their forefathers lived, in all their savagery, barbarity, and cannibalism. Even in the coastal villages today, murder is inseparably linked with the social law which shuns a youth who has not shed human blood. The Papuan is born, lives, and dies within the limits of his own village. Each tribe has a different language, and tribal feuds are the bane of their existence. A Papuan village is a self-contained and virtually self-supporting community. The people build their own houses, grow their own food, make their own clothes, fell and hollow out the trees for their canoes, and make spears and nets used in hunting and fishing. The practice of cannibalism has so depleted the male population, to whom this fate generally falls, that the women greatly outnumber the men. Consequently, polygamy is freely practiced, and women have the right of proposal. If a man refuses a woman who proposes to him, he is liable to a terrific beating at the hands of her relatives because of the disgrace which he would bring to her through his refusal. Perhaps the real reason for the relatives' interest in weddings is the fact that it is customary for them to receive desirable gifts from the groom in exchange for the bride. The married woman is expected to do all the housework, bear children, share her husband's affections with the other women he marries, till the soil, and act as a beast of burden in general. When a Papuan girl is about 3 years of age, her mother makes her a little grass skirt, and the fashion for this, her one garment, never alters to the day of her death. At the age of 30, she is usually a grandmother, and at the age of 40, if she lives that long, she becomes a wrinkled old hag. Although the Papuans have a natural antipathy for clothing, they go to great extremes to bedeck their heads, particularly for festive occasions. This colorful headpiece is made of bird of paradise feathers, and it represents a small fortune to the owner. Foreign missionaries have already begun to function in Papua, and very often the creed of a native will depend upon the mission that gives away the most generous portions of tobacco and trinkets. The greatest problem the missionaries have to face in this strange land is the multiplicity of dialects and the entanglements of tongues. The word canoe kanuma, for example, was freely misused by them to designate the Holy Spirit until they discovered it actually meant sweet potatoes to the particular natives they were seeking to convert. So goes the white man's religion in this part of the world. But if it ultimately succeeds in bringing education to the rising generation and peace to the ever-fighting tribes of Papua, it will have made a praiseworthy contribution to the cause of civilization. In the children of Papua lies the immediate hope of this strange land, and as we bid them farewell, our imagination thrills at the thought of the great changes destined for them in the years to come. And now we journey to Kalabahi, another primitive little port on the island of Allore in the Dutch East Indies. Apparently, Kalabahi has no history, and consequently little is known of its aboriginal settlers. But without question, some of the strangest-looking human creatures on the earth are to be seen here at the present time. Our first impression gives us the feeling that we have just arrived upon another planet and have come face to face with weird caricatures of human life. Extremely superstitious, they fetter their whole lives with a host of unnecessary sacrifices and prohibitive measures usually conjured up by the all-powerful witch doctors, who often keep entire villages in subjection. With a face like this, haunting one day and night, it is not difficult to understand the power it might have over a simple and childlike native, living in a primitive land of fear. European influence and European rule have had but a feeble foothold upon Kalabahi. It is shared, as is the whole island of Allore, between a host of petty rajas, turbulent and insular, and habitually at war with each other. In traveling over the world, we are constantly being reminded of the important part that dancing plays in the lives of primitive people. It is practically their only form of group diversion, and it is most decidedly one of their natural heritages. In fact, from time immemorial, dancing has been a common instinct in the human race. Here, however, the natives have a rather odd idea of what constitutes a dance. Mass movement appears to be the basis of it all. Most of them are vindictive savages, with an intense hatred for strangers. But the first visit of a great cruise ship has brought them in from their haunts in the hills and made them temporarily forget their natural enmity. From the cradle to the grave, life to these poor people is a continuous struggle for existence. Over them perpetually hangs the shadow of death, for if they are not slain and eaten by their enemies or sold into slavery, they are frequently exposed to the failure of their crops and the incurable diseases of the jungle. And all this may account for the absence of the slightest manifestation of joy in their expressionless faces. This dance of the automatons goes on for hours without a change of expression. They seem to dance themselves into a trance in which individuality becomes submerged and all move and think as one. Perhaps within a few short years, Kalabahi may become commercially civilized, and its inhabitants may take their inevitable place among the souvenir merchants of the more civilized ports of call. On this occasion, however, our money is without value, and the natives must be paid for their tribal dances with choice edibles from the ship. A piece of cheese is handed out as the first and choicest gift. Pearl shells are the chief medium of exchange for them, but they accepted our food commodities with as much satisfaction as they are capable of showing. There is something about this scene that reminds us of what it must have been like in bygone days, when white traders bartered with natives, often acquiring vast grants of land for a mere string of beads. After all, the history of man is but a page in the book of evolution. What happened centuries ago in the more civilized parts of the earth is happening this moment in Kalabahi, where primitive man still lives in all his primitive glory. Nevertheless, the vanguard of evolution is now marching upon him, and a few centuries hence, the grinding mill of time will crush out all the hell of superstition, ignorance, and fear which particularly dominates this part of the world. And it is with this thought that we say farewell to Papua and Calah High, weird haunts of strange people.